I see a few folks are joining. We're now at over 100 people in the room, so I'll get started in just a bit. Wanted to invite you all into our webinar today on Indigenous fire stewardship and wildfire management, key trends and lessons learned. So we're really excited to share with you all today a report that captures these key findings, and this will also be supplemented by a great panel of external speakers to talk about different case studies related to the insights in the report. I think we can get started just to make sure we have time for everyone's presentation. So good morning, afternoon, depending on your time zone, and thank you for being here today. My name is Isabella Barriga, Community Engagement Manager for Global Forest Watch at World Resources Institute. I'll be your moderator today. And as I was mentioning, today's session brings together researchers, community leaders, and practitioners working across the Americas to strengthen community-based fire management. And we'll be highlighting different case studies that we have globally, which are calling out how can we also uplift Indigenous-led stewardship and also share strategies for addressing the growing threat of extreme wildfires. We can go to the next slide. I'll walk us through our brief agenda for today. So we'll have an introduction from myself, and then we'll go through the fire data that is offered on Global Forest Watch, share some key findings from our recent report, as well as highlight case studies from our external speakers. We'll then have time at the end for questions, and we'll wrap up. So at any point, you're welcome to ask questions through our Q&A, but we'll save time at the end for answering questions live. And now I want to explain how to hear the webinar in different languages. And great to see some folks already sharing where they're coming from. Feel free to use the Q&A to share any comments or questions. So today's webinar will be hosted in English, but it's also going to be simultaneously and translated to Spanish. So if you would like to hear the Spanish interpretation, all you have to do is click interpretation. You'll see a globe icon at your Zoom navigation bar and click Spanish. Vice versa, we will have one speaker speaking in Spanish later during the webinar. So if you would like to hear his presentation in English, all you have to do is select the English channel. So I'll give folks some time to select the language they would prefer to hear today's webinar. I also want to note again, so you can ask questions through the Q&A. We'll have time at the end for your questions. If we were not able to answer your question today, we'll definitely follow up over email. And one final reminder is that today's webinar is indeed being recorded, so everybody will receive a copy of the recording as well as the slides from today's webinar in the next couple business days. Okay, I think most people are set with the interpreters, so I can go through our great lineup of speakers. So really happy to introduce James McCarthy. He's our research analyst at Global Forest Watch. He'll be speaking more about the data and the key finds in the report. We're also joined by Natasha Collins, who is the research and project development manager at Cities for Forests and the Natural Infrastructure Initiative at World Resources Institute. She's also going to be speaking alongside our great partner, Belinda Brown, who is the director from the Lamakatsi Restoration Project, focused on tribal partnerships. We'll also be hearing from Ricardo Abad, who is a technical analyst in geoprocessing and Indigenous territorial protection at Instituto Socioambiental. And then lastly, we'll hear actually first from Juan Pablo, who is the program director of the Instituto Boliviano de Investigación Forestal, IBIF. And lastly, again, I'm Isabel Barriga. I'm your moderator for today's session. And at this point, I'll quickly go through an intro to what is Global Forest Watch for those who may not be familiar. So at Global Forest Watch, this is an initiative at World Resources Institute. We provide free, openly accessible, near real-time data to monitor forests around the world. So we have a suite of tools designed to increase knowledge and transparency about forest landscapes, mobilize local action by governments, civil society, communities, as well as support private sector action to reduce community-driven deforestation and improve forest management. So in short, Global Forest Watch helps identify where forests are changing and provides the information needed to respond. And one of the major data sets that we provide is on our fires data, since fire is a major driver of forest change globally. And so we have data that supports early detection through fire alerts. You also have the opportunity to monitor fire trends over time and better understand what is forest loss. And this helps support prevention, response, and post-fire recovery. Therefore, we provide this suite of tools to support monitoring to help communities, governments, and partners act quickly and plan more effectively. So you'll hear from our speakers some of the great work that they're doing. And just to bridge this to WRI's broader fire work, it's also important to explain how we're working across fire management. We support multiple programs at WRI from, and the report we talk about Indigenous-led fire stewardship and practices such as cultural burning. We also support community-based fire management. We'll hear some case studies about how this also supported community engagement and youth employment, as well as innovative finance through the project that Cities for Forests is working on. And we have a lot of research that's diving into the drivers behind extreme wildfires. So within this large ecosystem of different projects, our work is to help provide the foundation for many of the case studies you'll hear today, even those who are using GFW and other data sets and resources. So I just wanted to briefly explain the overview of our broader work and then transition now to our first speaker. I'll hand it over to James to walk us through the fire data and the key findings from our recent report.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Isabella. Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk about the fire data and the key findings from our recent report. The fire data on Global Forest Watch supports fire management in a few different ways. So fire management is typically broken down into three different phases. There's the preparation phase, which happens before a fire occurs, and the goal is to reduce the likelihood and impact of fires. The second phase is the response phase, and that starts as soon as a fire is detected and involves identifying the size of the fire and the equipment and strategies needed to reduce the damage. The last phase is the recovery phase, and that happens after the fire is out and includes implementing restoration activities and reassessing fire management and evacuation plans for areas where it can be improved. While locally produced data is often the most useful, there are a lot of areas where local data is not available. Can you go back one slide, actually? Sorry. Uh, and so in these areas, fire data on GFW can help fill some of these data gaps. And in the next few slides, I'll briefly walk through a few of the fire-related data sets on GFW. But please note that we do have other webinars that we've done in the past where we dive into the fire detail in a lot more detail. And those are available through our website. And we also have additional resources on the Help Center, which I think Isabella will mention later. All right, we can move on to the next slide. Thank you. The Fire Weather Index on Global Forest Watch helps users identify where weather conditions make fires more likely in the coming week and is most useful during the preparation phase of fire management. While a lot of factors determine where fires occur, because fires thrive in hot, dry, and windy conditions, the Fire Weather Index combines data on temperature, precipitation, and wind speed to estimate fire risk. In areas with a fire weather index above 50 are usually at a greater risk of fire spreading out of control in the next 7 days. This data set is updated daily and can be used to identify areas with a high risk of fire. And the information can help identify when controlled burns should occur and whether additional measures like creating fire breaks might be needed to help control the spread of fires. The next data set I want to talk about is the active fire alert data set, and this is one of the most used data sets on GFW. It helps detect fires across all land cover types in near real time, which makes it a valuable early warning tool for or during the respond phase of fire management. The alerts capture a variety of fires, including wildfires and agricultural fires. Um, and the ability of the system to detect fires depends on a variety of factors, including the fire size and intensity, whether or not there's heavy cloud cover, the type of land cover it occurs in, and the time of day can all impact detection. And each alert is assigned a confidence level that's based on the strength of the fire signal. And high confidence alerts, if you filter the data by high confidence alerts, that has fewer false positives, but it may also miss some fires. And in contrast, using low confidence alerts, those tend to detect more fires, but will also include more false positives as well. And the data on GFW is updated daily and can be filtered by confidence level on the map and dashboard, depending on user preferences about whether they want to capture all fires or if they want to be more confident in the fires they do detect. And on this slide, I just wanted to show an example that users can sign up to receive email notifications when fire alerts are detected within a selected area of interest. In this example, we've added Indigenous and community land boundaries to show how a user can select an area of interest and link it to their MyGFW account. You can also select different protected areas or different administrative areas, or even upload your own boundary and get notifications when alerts occur in that area of interest. And later in the webinar, one of our speakers will share how they use fire alerts on Global Forest Watch as an early warning system for fires. The last data set I was going to talk about is the tree cover loss due to fire data on Global Forest Watch. This one identifies areas that burned in previous years and can be useful during the prepare and recover phases of fire management. It distinguishes between tree cover loss due to fire from other drivers of loss and provides information on forest fire extent and trends between 2001 and 2024. The dataset's updated annually, and it maps stand replacing forest fires caused by lightning and human activity, but generally excludes low intensity or understory fires. Fires used to clear recently logged areas or areas where debris is burned after trees are cut are not included in the data, but land clearing fires that escape into the surrounding forest are captured. And because previously burned areas are more likely to burn again, this data can help guide decisions on where to conduct controlled burns, establish fire breaks, and implement restoration activities to reduce forest fire risk. And there are two other tools that GFW offers that might be useful as well. Map Builder allows users to build a custom interactive map using the spatial data behind Global Forest Watch, including fire alerts, and they can combine that data with their own data sets. And it's accessible to users with varying GIS experience and supports powerful analysis tools that they can also take advantage of. The Forest Watcher is a mobile app. Well, there's also a web-based version as well, but it's designed for field use, and users can download fire alert data to work offline and navigate to points of interest in the field and then document what they find and share their data, even in remote locations. And now that we've covered the types of fire data available on GFW, we'd like to show how we've applied this data and share some recent findings. Looking at the tree cover loss due to fire data, we've seen a global increase in fire-driven forest loss in recent years. In 2023 and 2024, fire-driven forest loss was more than twice the annual average of the previous 2 decades. These were also the first years to approach or surpass the 1.5 degree Celsius warming threshold set in the Paris Climate Agreement and may offer a glimpse of the future if warming continues. Fires also make up a larger share of forest loss now, too. Historically, they accounted for about a quarter of forest loss, but that has increased in recent years to about a third. And while some fire is natural, we are seeing a shift in the size, frequency, and intensity of fires. They're becoming more intense and widespread and testing the limits of fire-adapted forests and spreading into places that rarely burned before, such as humid tropical forests. Tropical countries like Brazil, Bolivia, Peru, and the Democratic Republic of Congo are all seeing some of the fastest increases in forest fires. Last year, we used fire alert data to track fire activity in South America and found that Bolivia experienced almost twice as much fire activity as the previous record year. These shifts threaten not just forests themselves, but also the climate, biodiversity, and the communities that depend on them. Given the rapid rise in forest fires globally, particularly in the tropics, we wanted to understand what impact they had on indigenous peoples and forest-dependent communities who manage more than half the world's remaining intact forests, with much of the intact forest remaining in the Amazon. We also wanted to examine how traditional fire knowledge and indigenous leadership can help reduce the risk of extreme fires. Last month, we released a report on this topic, and today we're here to share some of our key findings and to hear firsthand how Indigenous peoples and local communities are leading the way in addressing these challenges. For the report, we used data on tree cover loss due to fire to understand the extent of forest fires on Indigenous and community managed lands, and focused our analysis on Australia, Brazil, Canada, and the United States. These countries were selected because they're the most prone to fire and had extensive data on indigenous and community lands. And although Russia accounted for more than 40% of global fire-driven tree cover loss, we ended up excluding it from the analysis because reliable data on indigenous and community lands was not available at the time of the study. We use data from Landmark, which is a global platform that supports indigenous peoples and local communities in protecting their land rights and securing tenure. Landmark aggregates data from a number of sources worldwide and includes locally defined boundaries of lands held or used by indigenous peoples and local communities. We included all indigenous and community lands in our analysis, whether or not they were formally recognized by governments. And we will have another webinar, a separate webinar that digs deeper into the Landmark platform in the coming weeks, so stay tuned for that. Using the data from Landmark and the tree cover loss data, as well as data on protected areas, we found that although indigenous and community lands experience the least amount of forest loss overall, most of the loss that does occur is caused by fire. And this pattern mirrors what we see in protected areas and suggests that in both cases, a higher proportion of fire-driven loss reflects their success in preventing more permanent and damaging forms of loss, like deforestation, but it also highlights their exposure to growing fire risks. Now, it's important to remember that not all fire is bad. Many ecosystems rely on periodic fire to stay healthy, and indigenous peoples and local communities have safely and sustainably used fire for generations to reduce fuel loads, improve soil, and support plant growth. And while fire use is also a cultural practice, it's also tied to knowledge systems that have been developed over generations. And these practices help maintain ecosystem health, support biodiversity, and reduce the risk of extreme fires. When applied at the right time and under the right conditions, cultural burning reduces the buildup of fuels that can drive severe wildfire events. And although some of the fire activity that's captured in the report is likely natural and beneficial, the report primarily focused on extreme wildfires. These fires are intense, hard to control, and damaging to forests. These kinds of fires are especially rare in humid tropical rainforests, making the recent increase particularly concerning. The impacts of these extreme fires cannot be overstated. They destroy homes and sacred sites, displace families, harm health, and threaten food security. And research has shown that indigenous peoples are often disproportionately affected by wildfires, which compounds existing social and economic inequities. In Canada, for example, indigenous communities are far more likely to face evacuations related to wildfire smoke. And between 1980 and 2021, out of the 16 communities that were evacuated 5 or more times, 14 of those were indigenous reserves. And in addition, about 90% of smoke-related evacuations involved communities where the population was majority indigenous, which highlights their elevated risk of smoke-related health impacts. Extreme wildfires globally, as well as those that affect indigenous and community lands, are often driven by factors outside their control. Climate change, deforestation, and repressive policies all increase fire risks on indigenous lands. Climate change makes forests hotter and drier, creating the conditions in which fires need to spread more quickly and become harder to control. And this even includes during traditional burning practices that have long been conducted safely. Deforestation also increases fire risk by breaking forests into smaller, more exposed patches that heat up and dry out and encourage the spread of highly flammable grasses. And in addition, when fire is used to clear woody debris, it can easily escape into nearby indigenous and community lands. And in some places, land clearing fires are also used to displace communities intentionally. Policies can also further increase the risk of extreme fires. For example, diverting water resources away from indigenous and community territories can dry out the landscape and make them more vulnerable. And in many countries, criminalizing traditional fire management has led to dangerous fuel buildup and the erosion of local ecological knowledge that helps prevent extreme fire events. The combination of these three factors has led to a 15-fold increase in annual fire-driven forest loss in indigenous and community lands in Brazil since 2001. We also see notable spikes during El Niño years when there's less rainfall and higher fire levels near areas with extensive deforestation, especially in areas where agricultural expansion is occurring. Given how rapidly fire risks are increasing, especially in places like Brazil, it's critical to focus on approaches that strengthen community resilience. A review of the literature identified four strategies that support Indigenous leadership and reduce wildfire impacts. The first one is strengthening and securing Indigenous and community land rights. Strong and secure land rights allow communities to manage forests using traditional practices and leads to lower forest loss and faster regrowth. This protects forest health, slows climate change, and reduces fire risks linked to deforestation. Studies continue to show that indigenous and community lands with secure rights lose less tree cover, store more carbon, and maintain higher biodiversity. The second recommendation was to increase funding for indigenous and community-led fire management initiatives. Indigenous peoples and local communities play a central role in preventing and responding to fires, especially in remote areas. And stable, long-term funding helps them build skilled workforces, maintain trained crews, and access essential equipment. It also supports traditional fire management, including controlled burns and forest restoration. Programs investing in these locally led approaches are already showing strong results, and we'll hear an example in the Western United States from one of our speakers later in the webinar. The third recommendation is integrated fire management, or adopting integrated fire management approaches. And integrated fire management combines local knowledge and customs with scientific data to reduce fire risk and achieve social and ecological goals. More than 60 countries recently backed a call to action on integrated fire management at the COP30 Leader Summit in Brazil this month, and we're encouraged to see growing recognition of the critical role that traditional controlled burns play in reducing wildfire risk and strengthening community resilience. Later in the webinar, we'll hear from one of our speakers about how they are implementing integrated fire management in the Brazilian Amazon. And lastly, uh, the fourth recommendation is to expand access to fire monitoring tools and early warning systems. And one of the reasons we have this recommendation is because it's a lot easier to put out fires when they're small. And satellite-based data like those on Global Forest Watch can alert communities to fires in near real time, giving them a critical head start in responding to fires. We'll hear more about this from a group using fire alert data in Bolivia in just a few moments. And I'll hand it back to Isabella after that.
Great. Thanks so much, Jimmy. It was such a great overview of how to use the different fire data on Global Forest Watch. And then based on the insights in the report, really happy to have speakers. I'm going to line up Juan Pablo right now, who's going to share a bit more how they've actually applied the data, what's worked well with their community and the partners they work with. So I will hand it off to Juan Pablo. Juan Pablo, tú puedes hablar ahora. Y for everyone here, he will be speaking
Muy
in
bien, sí,
Spanish. Sí. You can select
muy bien,
um, English to hear the interpretation in English. Thank you. Gracias, Juan
muy
Pablo.
bien. Muchas gracias, Isabela, y bueno, un placer estar acá compartiendo un poco de información de lo que trabajamos. En Lomerío, básicamente, se ha constituido un centro de monitoreo territorial indígena, el mismo que es una base fundamental para el tema de la prevención de incendios forestales, ¿no? Siguiente. Eh, Lomerío es un territorio que tiene actualmente 265.000 hectáreas, tiene 29 comunidades indígenas, las mismas que tienen la vocación de manejar sus bosques, conservar sus bosques y también hacer el manejo del fuego, ¿no? Se dice ahí de que el fuego es vida y en ese sentido ellos tienen la preparación y los medios necesarios para poder hacer las cosas de manera adecuada. Siguiente, por favor. Esta es la estructura. Es importante hablar de que para el tema de la prevención de incendios, para la deforestación, para el manejo forestal, etcétera, tiene que haber una gobernanza, ¿no? Esta gobernanza debe ser adecuada y si no lo hubiera, es muy difícil de que pueda funcionar cualquier tipo de herramienta o sistema. Hay una CICOL, la misma que es la organización matriz y tiene un cacique de tierra y territorio y recursos naturales, el responsable de manejar todo el tema de recursos naturales. Hay una unidad técnica territorial donde hay monitores territoriales divididos en 4 zonas. En total hay cerca de 20 monitores que están actuando actualmente y también tienen cuadrillas de bomberos forestales, ¿no? Gente que ha sido capacitada ya desde el año 2019 y también están las comunidades, ¿no? Definidas en 4 zonas de las 29 y finalmente ellos articulan con el COE municipal, ¿no? Es el Comité de Emergencia Municipal cuando se dan algunos eventos ya que salen del nivel que pueden manejar los indígenas, ¿no? Por favor, siguiente. Las acciones del monitoreo territorial indígena, en este caso, es un estudio de caso que estamos mostrando, que es en Lomerío, en la Chiquitanía, es el primero, la verificación de focos de calor e incendios forestales, el mismo que ha sido usado como base siempre el Global Forest Watch. Está la verificación de la deforestación, que también se lo hace con la plataforma. Está el monitoreo al manejo forestal comunitario, dado que esto es fundamental para consolidar la conservación de los bosques. También es importante mencionar que hay un monitoreo de los recursos hídricos. ¿Ya? Entonces, esto es básico para poder tener el centro de monitoreo y hacer las gestiones correspondientes. Siguiente, por favor. Eh, es importante también mostrar eh, el, una línea de tiempo de lo que se ha trabajado con este centro de monitoreo. Eh, Así que por ejemplo, en el año 2018, en Lomerío, lo que se hizo fue la conformación, la estructuración y la propuesta de la creación del centro de monitoreo. El año 2019 fue el año donde hubieron una intensa cantidad de incendios, fueron bastante fuertes. Ahí se empezó con la preparación de 15 monitores. Hubieron incendios en Lomerío que llegaron a unas 85.000 hectáreas aproximadamente y también ese año ha sido de bastante sequía y heladas, que esto ha ayudado que haya más cantidad de combustible y que favorezca obviamente los incendios. El 2020 se creó la unidad técnica territorial, la misma que se hizo con el desarrollo de capacidades y competencias a técnicos de la unidad técnica, se hicieron la elaboración de planes de monitoreo territorial y protocolos, los mismos que son base fundamental para que esto se implemente. También hay un control de quemas que se empieza a escribir y a normar, que este control de quemas es hecho por los diferentes comunarios en el momento que tienen que hacer la actividad, donde está tanto el vecino como la persona que va a hacer la actividad y sus representantes, quienes son los caciques, ¿no? El 2021, la CICOL ha mostrado monitoreo en el tema del focus de calor, a incendios forestales y deforestación. Incluso la misma BT empieza a considerarlo como un actor importante a nivel indígena. En el año 2022, la aplicación de competencias, los reportes de focos de calor, se hace la identificación de recursos hídricos en Lomerío, porque el recurso hídrico es fundamental, dado que es un territorio que no tiene mucha precipitación, que no tiene mucho recurso hídrico, porque está justamente situado en un lugar que se llama el escudo precámbrico boliviano brasilero, donde el suelo es bastante superficial y en la parte de abajo hay una roca que no permite el almacenamiento de mucha agua. Por otra parte, también ya en el año 2024 hay una capacitación más fuerte, pero ya se empieza a incluir el tema del manejo forestal como parte de las actividades que pueden realizar los monitores, porque el tema de incendios principalmente están en los tiempos secos, ¿no? De junio a octubre aproximadamente. Y finalmente en el año 2025 podemos ver de que tenemos ya un centro de monitoreo fortalecido que puede desarrollar las diferentes labores de reportes de focos de calor, de incendios, de manejo forestal y también, obviamente, de la verificación de los mismos. Mientras que en el año 2019 habían unos incendios de 80.000 hectáreas, ya en el año 2025 se reportan algo de menos de 6.000 hectáreas, ¿no? Entonces, esto hace ver de que está funcionando el sistema. Siguiente, por favor. Acá podemos ver el desarrollo de lo que sucedió desde el año 2019 hasta el 2024 en cuanto a incendios forestales, principalmente en Lomerío. El año 2019 podemos ver de que, acá está un poco mal el dato, 85.000 hectáreas que fueron afectadas por los incendios, pero los años siguientes va reduciendo significativamente, el 2020, 21, 22, 23, 24, el 24 de repente vuelve un poco a subir, pero no mucho a nivel de la escala nacional, ¿no? A nivel nacional se llegó a 11 millones de hectáreas de afectación de incendios, pero Lomerío solamente llegó a un 2%. Esto significa de que el Lomerío está muy consciente en cuanto a todas las comunidades, a la unidad técnica territorial, a los caciques, a la dirigencia y a la preparación que tiene la gente, ¿no? Ya hay brigadas definidas para atender los diferentes sucesos. La siguiente. Acá podemos ver los reportes de focos de calor que han habido en los diferentes años. Si bien no se ven muchos, pero sí son reportes que tienen que ver con cambios y la determinación de diferentes eventos que se han dado en el tema de incendios forestales, ¿ya? Siguiente, por favor. Los desafíos que tienen estos centros de monitoreo, porque actualmente hay dos que están funcionando de forma adecuada en Santa Cruz, en Bolivia, es que todavía se tiene que continuar con la capacidad técnica y la formación. Es importante la participación de los jóvenes, quienes son muy hábiles para poder adoptar la tecnología, la aplicación del Global Forest Watch, aplicación de Avenza Map y una serie de aplicaciones que se utilizan para poder hacer las verificaciones correspondientes. También está el tema de la logística y del transporte, es importante que se tiene que ir mejorando y también la conexión que hay a nivel interinstitucional con instituciones subnacionales, gobiernos municipales, gobiernos departamentales, etcétera, ¿no? Y también que puede compartir la información y transferir el conocimiento a otros pueblos indígenas que son parte importante de Bolivia y que son los que tienen la mayor cantidad de bosques en el país, ¿no? Bosques tropicales. La siguiente. Mencionar también de que el trabajo con los centros de monitoreo ha sido necesario debido a las dificultades que tienen los gobiernos municipales y departamentales de poder aplicar estas acciones directamente en los territorios, ¿no? En ese sentido es de que el Lomerío ha tenido que desarrollar todas estas capacidades y ahora, además de lograr hacer las evaluaciones, hacer las verificaciones de campo, que es lo que interesa incluso, porque muchas de las detecciones que hay puede ser que sean falsas, como mostró anteriormente el anterior expositor, eh, todos estos esfuerzos que se han logrado, creo que de alguna manera están permitiendo ser un soporte para la prevención de incendios forestales y también para mitigar algunos aspectos, ¿no? Porque la mitigación es más complicada y más costosa, ¿no? Con los datos que vemos de Lomerío, la reducción que ha sido de los incendios forestales a nivel nacional comparativamente ha sido muy, muy importante, ¿no? Eh, Incluso actualmente los centros de monitoreo están apoyando a los gobiernos municipales, a sus unidades de gestión de riesgos, dado de que la gente de estos pueblos indígenas son gentes que son, no quiero decir fijas, pero sí es gente que es más permanente. En cambio, a nivel institucional, gubernamental, hay un cambio político seguido de la gente. Entonces, como que si uno le brinda las capacidades, al ser cambiados, otra vez tenemos que hacer gestión de capacitación, etcétera, ¿no? Entonces, esos creo que son unos valores fundamentales que permiten de que los centros de monitoreo se conviertan en, en actores importantes para la prevención de incendios forestales e incluso para la mitigación, conservación de los bosques, y también para tratar de conservar los recursos hídricos, ¿no? Que es algo que también se ha empezado a trabajar en Lomerío y en Guarayos principalmente. Bueno, con esto creo que llego a la conclusión de esta presentación. Quedo atento para poder seguir conversando y seguir absorbiendo seguramente algunas dudas que puedan haber. Ya, muchísimas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias, Juan. Es muy interesante para escuchar más sobre tu trabajo y oportunidades para colaborar. Y hay algunas preguntas para ti en el chat. y
Perfecto,
and
gracias.
gracias. And now we'll switch back to English. So, for anybody who would like to hear the rest of the webinar in Spanish, you can select Spanish. Si puedes escuchar el webinar en español, puedes seleccionar español en la opción de interpretación. And with that, I'll hand off to our next speaker, Ricardo Abad, who will tell you a bit more of the work they're doing in Brazil. Ricardo, whenever you're ready.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
That's great. Thank you.
Okay. Well, my name is Ricardo Abad. I work for Instituto Socioambiental here in Brazil, specifically for the Xingu program. And I'll be talking about wildfires in the Xingu. So both the Xingu water basin, but I'll talk specific study cases for the Xingu territory, which is just one of the indigenous territory along within the Xingu River basin. So here you can see this photo, which is really common around April. And if you're driving around the Xingu territory, it's just major fires that really draw your attention. And so here you can see this this map of the Xingu River Basin, and in blue you can see the protected areas. And I like this graph just to explicit this climatic emergency where you can see on the blue line late in the last few years we have a more occurrence of fires within the protected areas than we have outside. So this is just a real good example to see how this emergency is becoming. And next you can see this map of recurrence and also where we have new fires. The inset map can focus on the Xingu territory, indigenous territory. And in purple, you can see the areas that have burnt for the first time in all of the historic series mapped since '85. So it's a really, really a big problem that we are facing more in this more recent times here in Xingu. And we have to talk about the two different types of fires. So we have the traditional fire, which is set under control, and it's used as a cultural tool, used to renew the vegetation and the soil, and it's usually confined into small areas and controlled. There's a specific time where you put the fires, and what we see now is just the expansion of these wildfires, which is really destructive, and it has no control. And this is the fire that goes into the humid forests, and because of many different factors, climatic factors and other management factors of the region, we have seen this problem become more and more frequent. So here we can see the amount of forest that has burnt within the Xingu Indigenous Territory. And since 2010, we start to see really high examples and occurrences of fire. We put 4 years here, 2010, 16, 2020, and 22, which were really bad in this last decade or so. And it really shows how we have reached this really unstable climatic time, where you can clearly see on this chart the amount of fires and the region that it's affecting. So for this, we need to be prepared, and we have this this map, just a series of maps, just to show you in purple how much forest is being burnt. You can see that there is some red patches. These red areas, they are fire occurrences within these fields, which are floodable and have historically been evolved with the fire management. So it is not so destructive. It happens naturally. And also with the indigenous communities. And what we see is, can you move to the next slide, please, where there's a forest fire versus grassland fires? Because it did not update for me. Here we go. So I put some 4 years, those 4 years that I displayed. So 2010, 16, 20, and 2022, you can clearly see how much more of this purple area have been burnt. And these areas are the bad fires that happen within the really humid tropical forest. Next, please. So we have started implementing the integrated forest management strategy in some villages. The Xingu territory is composed of 16 different ethnic groups, and so it's a very dynamic governance that happens. And we are focusing more on the high Xingu, and closer to the watersheds, on this transition between Cerrado and forest. And we're applying these controlled burns, prescribed burns, within the early dry season, which is April and May. And the results are these barriers where you can kind of see in black on this middle picture. And these areas serves as for when the really dry season, so September 4th, when this time comes, if any problems with fires, be it natural or human-induced, they will be more likely to be controlled with less effort. So it's something we have been implementing in some villages, and I'll bring this example of the Tanguru village, and which we began in maybe 2-3 years, really working with the villages, trying to create this adaptive management plan. So if you can please move to the next slide. We work with the villages by making these meetings and mapping the area with everyone's involvement. So we call it like an ethno mapping, where they define different regions and the type of management that needs to be done. And the process is really important for them to recognize the importance of this planning. And with the satellite imagery and drone imagery, we can really help them visualize their territory, and it really brings the community together to define and also to set this calendar of events that will happen. So the prescribed burns, the areas that need to be intact, the areas that have been planted, and the areas that are being restored. You can just see on the next slide some pictures of this new equipment that have been acquired, and some images of, so we do use drone imagery, we use satellite imagery, and we have this support of the IBAMA Breve Fogo, which is the official firefighters for the forest fires, doing capacity building, and then later on doing the actual combats. And then we do have the other activities, such as the restoration activities. Another case study I would like to bring to you is regarding the land use outside of the protected area. If you can move to the next slide, please. It's focused on, thank you, on this specific river, the Tuatuari River Basin. And if you can see the headwaters, it comes out, one back, please. The real headwaters are outside the protected areas, and what we see there has been a really big expansion of agriculture, and also the creation of lots of dams. Thank you. So with the creation of these dams and the high agriculture or deforestation rates outside of the watershed, there has been a very drastic water cover reduction of more than 9,000 hectares, and it is plotted as a red on the left in red. So all of this red areas used to be just a huge swamp, which was more than 80% of the year filled with water. And what we see now is just it usually has 1 or 2 months of water cover, and then it's just dry. And on the right, you can see in pink these areas that have been burnt for the first time in 2023. So that's over 22,000 hectares of wet forest that burnt. And it is very likely due to this management that happens outside, and all of these dams that are being created. So next, please. just to finish, some other examples of the fires that we have in the Xingu River, in the Xingu territory, sorry. This first case in Tupepehueque was a big fire that happened due to the breach of a treaty where it was not supposed to burn at a specific time, and a person went and burned and did what was not supposed to happen. And it was a very large fire, very difficult to fight because of access. It's difficult to access. On number two is the fire from illegal loggers. So this region in the Hawo village is being exploited, and the forest becomes really dried up, and anything that can spark a fire will cause a very large and difficult to fight fire. And number three, we do have fires from lightning, and you can see that this specific one, it started, and in less than a day, it just died out because it happened in an area of wet forest that had not been burnt yet. So by itself, it just controlled the fire. And on the next slide, we just have a picture of each one of these regions, trying to depict what we can see on the ground. And that's my talk. Thanks so much.
Great. Excellent, Ricardo. Really interesting to hear more about the work that you all have done and applications for some other case studies. I think there's a lot to learn from what you've done with the Xingu group. So thank you again. And now we'll hand it off to our last speaker. We'll be hearing from Natasha Collins and Belinda Brown. They'll be sharing their presentation portion at this stage. So Natasha, the floor is all yours.
Great. Thanks, Isabella. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here, and thanks for sticking around. I'm Natasha Collins, Research and Project Development Manager with Cities for Forests at WRI. Cities for Forests helps cities and communities use nature to solve problems. And in the US, that often focuses on restoring forests. But contrary to other geographies, this often isn't by planting trees, but actually by removing overgrown stands to reduce wildfire risk and improve forest health. So Cities for Forests provides technical assistance and creative funding and financed solutions to get projects done, which I'll cover a little bit later. But I'd really like to introduce my co-presenter, Belinda Brown, who is the Tribal Partnerships Director at Lomacotsi Restoration Project. This is one of our great on-the-ground implementation partners. And Lomacotsi is a tribally affiliated nonprofit based in Southern Oregon. They have 30 plus years of leadership in forest and watershed management, wildfire resilience, and workforce development. So I'll pass it over to Belinda to talk more about Lomacotsi's work.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to some. Chimisun wi itu dekam, Mcjanawi, Hadachi, Takati, Dati. In our language, I said, "How are you, all my relatives?" And we are all the children of Mother Earth. So in order to understand our existence here on this earth as Aboriginal people, I would like all of you to think about your origin and celebrate your indigeneity. All of us have a commission to care for our earth. All of us come from the earth, and we need to understand that we need to honor the earth as our mother. And for Aboriginal people in America, we haven't had a very good history of policy. So we are the problem and we are the answer. In 1830 in North America, we actually had Indian policy that forcibly removed our Aboriginal people. By 1850, they are outlawing fire, anthropogenic fire. So fire is a tool for the land, and fire is good for the earth. It's medicine for the earth, and the earth needs us as its people, and it also needs fire as a land management tool. Lomakatsi is a Hopi word that means beautiful life, life in balance. And at Lomakatsi, we try to provide that to our land and to our people. I'd like to honor Marco Bay, our executive director who founded Lomakatsi 30 years ago, as we continue this work in our region of Oregon, California, and Idaho and Nevada, where we have collectively about 1.5 million Aboriginal people still here, still doing the work of our people for time immemorial. Again, all of you are Indigenous to some place on this globe, and we haven't lost our commission to take care of the earth in a good way. Many of our ceremonies begin with fire, begin with honoring the land and honoring each other, as most of the elements that we are made up of also come from the earth. So we need to be connected to the earth again. We need to be connected to our ceremonies again. All of us need to be connected to the natural rhythms of the earth, sea, and heavens, and realize that the fire, the water, the earth, and the air are all those sacred elements that we need to care for and tend to as we walk this earth for the short period of time that we get to live here. So what you're looking at in the top left is a simplified forest. As the policies came into the North Americas, they wanted timber for a resource for extraction rather than to care for as our land, as a sacred element. What we do now is we go in and ecologically thin the forest in a best practice manner. Individuals, clumps, and openings, like a natural fire would go in and create a mosaic. Now we go in and create that mosaic with ecological forestry. Then we're able to help and restore the old trees, the legacy trees, the trees that continue to protect us. And then we can go in and put fire on the ground. So it's a heavy lift when we go into the forest. And now, because it's departed 195 years from our people taking care of the land, we've got a lot of work to do. It's like a great big overgrown carrot patch. We need to go in and ecologically thin, remove some of the density of the trees in there now, and then the restoration byproducts, the small diameter logs that come out of there and go to our mills to help our workforce also in our local communities are taken out, and then fire is put back in a good way to keep the disease down and the hazardous fuels down. We have a workforce development program paid to train for our young adults that are our now and future leaders. And with that workforce, we're able to provide an on-ramp camp for a natural resource career pathway. Our young adults, 16 to 30, up to 35, if they're veterans, have an ability to gain their first aid, their CPR, their incident command system, 100, 200, 700, their SAW certifications, their wildland fire certifications, their cultural monitoring certifications. And with that, they get the Public Land Corps hiring certificate, which enables them to go to work in federal agencies for their tribes, for state, or even start a business of their own. With 640 hours of Public Land Corps hours, they are able to then go on to become a forest technician through our registered apprenticeship program, which is another 2,000 hours a year long of workforce paid to train for our Indigenous people and rural frontier youth who are going out and working on these lands, large landscape restoration, where we're completing about 40,000 acres of work a year of hazardous fuels reduction, prescribed burning, and then we're able to go in and put that good cultural fire, the cool burning on the ground. It's been a part of our Aboriginal culture, this anthropogenic fire, for time immemorial. We are the first best land stewards. And with this work, we are marrying Western science with Indigenous traditional ecological knowledge and coming to a win-win with our partnerships and collaborations, working together, putting people to work, and also getting that good fire back there on the land so that reduce our hazardous fuels and protect our communities in strategic places on the landscape that help our forests be healthy and provide that training for our youth. It's more than a tool. Fire is a culture. We are a culture of people that need that connection to the earth, that need to be on the land. The removal, forcible removal of our people off of the land is what has caused the situation that we have today with the catastrophic fires. The land, the earth, is our church. It's our home. It's our pharmacy. It's our Home Depot. It's where we went to for our sustenance. So we don't own the land. We belong to that. And that's one of the paradigm shifts that we need to come to today, is our living close to the land and regarding it as sacred to us as we are sacred to it. One of the things that we manage for and that we have managed for time immemorial is our first foods. So what you're looking at here is one of our foods in the Latin name called Paradiridia. In our native name, in my language, we call it Baja. And in other Klamath tribal language, it's called Apaz. In the Northern Paiute language, it's called Yapa. So we have all of these languages that the earth remembers too. So in the singing and the drumming and the dancing society that you have all come from in your Aboriginal place, we overcome the nature deficit disorder that our youth are facing right now by enabling them and providing environments for them to go back out on the land and dig our first roots, which our elders will tell you are always the best food for us as we live close in our environment and eat what is provided in our environment, farm what is provided in the environment in which we live, so that healthy living can take place again in that close connection that we have with the earth, which is our mother. Active management does work. The prescriptions for our Mother Earth work. As you see in this picture, forest that's departed from its original capacity, where it was thinned only on the left-hand side, no treatment at all on the right-hand side, and in the middle, in that island of green that you see that survived a severe wildfire called the Bootleg Fire on the Fremont National Forest and the ancestral lands of the Klamath tribes, where we went in, marked, and treated the forest in a best practice manner, individuals, clumps, and openings. And then the Forest Service, a partner, the U.S. Forest Service, went in and provided the prescribed burning with crews. And when the fire hit a couple years ago, 2021, I believe, that Bootleg Fire, the fire went to the ground, did exactly what it was supposed to do, and left that island of green there. So we know that what we do works out there on the land, and we need more people and workforce and industry to be working together to get this job done. We're 195 years departed from how our forest systems used to be, and it is going to take all of us together to overcome the future of fire and community. The community and collaboration is where we need to start. We move at the speed of trust. So we do need to trust each other. We do need to come together. So local, state, federal, entrepreneurs, partners of all kinds need to come together to address what we have in our communities. This is the region that Lomacatsi works in currently across Oregon, California, Nevada, and Idaho, again, where we have about 1.5 million Aboriginal people still living and working together to restore our land, our water, our way of life, and understanding that the first best stewards of the land now, which are all of us, because we need everyone to do this work together, have to come together in collaborative partnerships. And in those collaborative partnerships, we're going to find the success of being able to treat our land in a good manner with these best practices, able to raise up now and future workforce who can work on their land, overcoming nature deficit disorder for our young people who are currently addicted to technology. Technology is helping us right now, today. However, for the most part, we're always going to feel happier and healthier out on the land, doing the work that Creator gave us to do. And no matter whose name is on the tax lot today, our Aboriginal people are still commissioned by Creator to take care of this earth in a good way and to take care of each other. So for nature and for the people, we need to work together to continue doing this great work. So we thank all of our partners that are doing this work, and we will continue to do this work. Blue Forest, Cities for Forest, our Southern Oregon Forest Restoration Collaborative, the Nature Conservancy, and many, many other partners, federal agencies, the U.S. Forest Service, the BLM, all need to work in this capacity to get the job done. Thank you very much, and I will turn it back to Natasha.
Great. Next slide, please. Thank you, Belinda. Yeah, you're extremely well spoken, and it's great to hear more about the work that Lomacatsi has been doing. I wanted to close out this presentation just giving a little bit more background on the role that Cities for Forests plays with our partners, and also highlight some of the impact numbers of what Lomacatsi has done on the ground. So Cities for Forests, as I mentioned before, we really focus on helping cities and communities use nature as infrastructure. So we work nationwide on forest restoration and wildfire resilience. We have three main core offerings. The first is political advocacy and community engagement. Please click the animation. The second is technical support and added capacity for the Forest Service and local partners. And the third is on economics and finance. So this includes doing cost benefit analyses for the work and also raising private capital. I'm going to talk briefly about the last piece today, so how we help partners raise funding and finance for projects. And I'm going to illustrate them with two different site visits that I had the pleasure of joining. Next slide, please. So on the Fremont-Wainema National Forest in Oregon, Lomacatsi worked to thin forests to reduce wildfire risk, and Cities for Forests connected the project with the Caterpillar Foundation, which prioritizes workforce development and nature. So this work has enabled Lomacatsi to expand their restoration impact, and thanks to multiple funders that Lomacatsi has brought in, that other partners have brought in, the organization has restored 35,000 of acres in last year alone. Next slide, please. The second piece I want to highlight is another visit I got to attend on the Rogue Valley, and this is where partners launched a forest resilience bond. So this goes into the second angle of finance. A forest resilience bond works like a traditional bond, but it focuses on forest restoration. So restoration is often reimbursement based, meaning that implementers have to carry the upfront costs and wait long periods of time. But the Forest Resilience Bond works to actually pool together capital upfront so that work can start immediately. And then agencies and organizations like the Forest Service can then repay that back over time. So that can really increase the pace and scale at which work is able to be done. So this model is helping Lomacotsi accelerate restoration across 79,000 acres in the Rogue Basin, which will reduce wildfire risk and support local crews and communities. But as Belinda mentioned, the core takeaway I think is really that collaboration makes restoration possible. Funding is really critical, but people and partnerships get the work done. And tackling the wildfire crisis really requires everyone working together across agencies, Native nations, nonprofits, and communities. So thank you so much for listening. Up here are two links. One is a WRI Insights blog that talks about the work that Lomacotsi does and has a short video. And then there's also a direct link to Lomacotzi's website. Thank you so much. I'll pass it over to Belinda as well to say her thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Greatly appreciate your time. Belinda Brown, co-selected band member of the Ajumawi Otsage Nation. Itu Dekam, all my relations, Mikjanui, Hadachi, Takati, Dati, remember that you are all the children of the heart of Mother Earth. Thank you.
Wow, well, thank you for ending on that note. It's incredible and very inspiring. Got a lot of comments in the chat of just how inspired that everyone is from our diverse set of speakers today. So just an applause for all of our amazing speakers and preparing great presentations to highlight what is the role of not just data, but of people and how when you put those two together, community action with evidence and tools and using traditional knowledge, so complementary. And just want to thank all the speakers. We can transition now to the Q&A. At this point, we'll have all the speakers turn on their cameras. I'm going to also, while they're setting that up, I'm going to drop the Insights article that Natasha and Belinda just mentioned. So feel free to read that. We put a lot of resources in the chat. We already answered a lot of questions, but we're going to try and get through everyone's questions in the next, we have a bit under 20 minutes. But if we did not have time to answer your question today, we'll definitely follow up over email. So I want to kick us off with some questions we already got in the chat. I will hand this one to Jimmy here. There was a question. We were from an active firefighter from Australia, and they're also, her name is Kate. They're also very active on the climate change campaigning and very interested in Indigenous rights and management as well as data. They would like to stay engaged and wanted to ask whether this mapping is able to show us the changing types of forests as they recover after fires, and also whether indigenous communities, are able to access the fire mapper tools, etc. So wanted to open up that question for Jimmy first. Of course, invite the panelists to also chime in if they have any thoughts.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for your question. I wasn't entirely sure what you meant by changing type of forests, but we do have data on tree cover gain that can show forest recovery after fires occur. And I think in the coming months, we'll soon have a data set that shows annual land cover change as well. So that might show kind of differences or changes between forests to shrubland and grasslands over time. So that might, I think, answer your question on at least the first half. And then I think is the question about, do Indigenous communities have access to the fire mapper tools? And we do make everything publicly available for free. And we're already working with a few groups in South America. You heard from Juan Pablo about the work that they're doing in Bolivia. We've also recently worked with some groups in Colombia and Peru who are going to be using some of our data to monitor within their communities, as well as some groups in Indonesia as well that have used our data. We're always happy to do local trainings. So if there's anything that you think would be of interest in your area, feel free to reach out and yeah, we can talk about that.
Great. Thanks so much, Jimmy. And with that, I can also hand this next question to Juan Pablo. This was asked in Spanish. So let me say the Spanish version first, and I can translate to English. Juan Pablo, muchas gracias por la presentación. ¿Cuáles son ejemplos o técnicos de las comunidades locales para proteger los bosques? ¿Cómo leen los señales de la naturaleza? ¿Enfocan en la temporada, humedad, viento y cosas así? So thanking Juan Pablo for the presentation. What are some examples or techniques used by local communities to protect the forest? How do they read the signs of nature? Do they focus on the season, humidity, wind, and things like that? And Juan Pablo, ¿quieres responder? Would you
Muy
like to
bien.
respond?
Ok, gracias. Sí, los pueblos indígenas tienen características innatas para conservar los bosques, ¿no? Porque ellos viven de los bosques. Entonces, no tienen la tradición de hacer el cambio de uso del suelo y nada de eso, pero en todo caso, cuando toca, por ejemplo, eh, hacer las quemas controladas para sus cultivos que son de subsistencia, ellos utilizan sus conocimientos tradicionales y nosotros les hemos ayudado a desarrollar protocolos escritos, los mismos que les sirven para poder hacer de una mejor manera las quemas controladas, ¿no? Obviamente evitan también situaciones cuando hay vientos y también cuando es la hora intensa de calor, también evitan que haya eso. La luna también es parte de su cultura. En Luna Nueva, por ejemplo, no desarrollan actividades agrícolas ni actividades productivas, porque la luna ellos tienen ese conocimiento que no les permite desarrollar labores. Tampoco tuman árboles porque los árboles se parten. Las características de los pueblos indígenas, les repito, en la conservación de sus bosques está ligada ahora al manejo forestal, ¿no? Porque ellos van a vivir mucho tiempo de esto. En épocas de lluvias tienen cultivos de subsistencia, solamente porque no tienen riego, son zonas con poca agua, hay mucha sequía y además ellos realizan los cultivos en temporadas de lluvia, ¿no? Esa es la característica que tienen principalmente la gente que vive en la chiquitanía.
Gracias, Juan Pablo. And for those who want to switch back to the interpretation feature to hear in English, I'll ask this question for Ricardo. A question for Ricardo. We know that some indigenous communities in Brazil had originally nomadic habits. The management of fire was largely guided by exploring different parts of the landscape over time. Today, we see that indigenous communities are confined to small reserves, maintaining a use of fire that should be used across the landscape. It would be interesting to examine the reserves in the Cerrado biome from this perspective of the necessary behavioral change to maintain the environmental value of the territory. Is ISA also looking at the Cerrado reserves? Would you like to maybe provide some insights around this, Ricardo, from the work of Instituto Socioambiental?
Yes, well, actually, there are many indigenous reserves in the Cerrado within the Xingu Basin, but we do not specifically work with them. Although we do monitor them through the remote sensing and other products, but we do not engage and do any groundwork with them. We do have some groundwork with the traditional quilombolas here in the Cerrado of Goiás, in the frontier with Tocantins, and it really. But looking from the outside and not working with them, it's very clear that they do still use the fire. So the Chavanti specifically, which are within the Xingu River, but outside of the corridor, really on the southern border, which is just pure Cerrado. And we see that their areas burn almost 100% each year. And in this rate, I mean, if it just keeps doing burns every year, soon there will be a collapse, and I believe that there should be some work done on the ground with them, but we can't hug the whole world. But thanks for the question.
Thanks, Ricardo. That's interesting perspective. Now, this one more from the financing side, and yes, it was very timely. We had COP30, was happening, and there was many discussions, and there was a question around Indigenous participation and the agreement to increase funding for resilience. So the question we have here, what are the implications for helping Indigenous communities manage fires? I think, Natasha, would you like to address this, and or Jimmy? I think you both could have some interesting examples based off of the current work with communities and making some connections to COP.
Yeah, maybe Jimmy, do you want to start on a more global perspective, and then I can speak more to the US side?
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. So yeah, I think that this is a really great question. And I think it was really encouraging to see there were several kind of landmark pledges. One was to renew the Forest and Land Tenure Pledge, which is $1.8 billion of funding through 2030 and aims to secure and formally recognize 160 million hectares of land for communities and Indigenous peoples. There's also the Tropical Forest Forever facility that was launched, which includes a target requiring 20% of payments to go to Indigenous peoples and local communities. And I think the call to action that I mentioned earlier, call to action on integrated fire management, was also encouraging because it specifically calls for supporting traditional fire management. So I think there's definitely a lot of great commitments, but I think, and if they are followed through, I think they could be transformative, but we'll have to kind of wait and see if governments are able to turn kind of the words into action in the future.
Great, and I'll just add on this, and I think this also refers to another question that someone had in the chat specifically about the Trump administration. And so I think in terms of US forest restoration and indigenous management, it obviously is highly affected by the current government administration, and there has been challenges with the Trump administration in terms of different budget cuts or refunding allocations. I think Belinda can speak to how that has affected Lomacatsi. But the focus, I think, is really thinking about how does the work that we do also align with some of the current administration's priorities. And so I think really focusing on the wildfire piece that feels really bipartisan, like protecting homes, protecting livelihoods, reducing danger, and increasing safety for folks related to wildfire, also water security related to that. And then I think the piece that Lomacatsi is really strong on as well is that workforce development piece. And so I think job creation, training, and things like that. So it has been really challenging to navigate. And I think some of the success has been found at really figuring out where there's kind of some alignment in terms of the priorities. But I invite Belinda, if you have anything to add on that, please feel free.
What I would add is the people make the policies, the people are our leaders, and we are the people. So we are the ones that are going to get this job done. So policy down, grassroots up, coming together, realizing that most of the time that 80% of our needs are the same. So it really is, to me, Lomacatsi also a people issue, and the understanding that we need and the ability to admit when we're wrong and we need to make a course adjustment. I think that's one of the hardest things for people to do. In the state of California, we have a saying that we need to manage ecosystems before we can manage ecosystems. And the human variable is what we need to touch. And when we're able to change the hearts of people and realize that we're all on this globe together, is when we'll see the policy changes, when we'll see the local community changes, the tribal government changes that we need to be able to address the issues that we have today realistically with science backing it, Western science and indigenous traditional ecological knowledge coming together in those win-win collaboratives and partnerships that we need to get this work done across the globe and honoring each other as earth-based people.
Very powerful. No, I think it's a great reminder for everyone and supports our call to action here. So thank you again for that response. And Jimmy, Natasha, Belinda, I think I can end with one more question. I think we have just a few more minutes before we wrap up. Again, if we didn't have time to answer your question today, please feel free to email us. I'll drop that in the chat. There was a question around, we now know that fire suppression efforts, especially in the Western US, have backfired, and we need to encourage smaller, low-level fires in these landscapes on a regular basis. Does Global Forest Watch account for this beneficial use of fire? And if so, how? I think while you have the floor, Natasha, Belinda, would you like to address this? And then Jimmy maybe can share from the Global Forest Watch side.
Great. Yeah, so I would love to hear, I'm not familiar with how Global Forest Watch incorporates this, but as Belinda mentioned, in a lot of the forest ecosystems, especially in the Western United States, fire is an important ecological part of the ecosystems. These forests are used to regular fire cycles, and I think because of forest management policies where fire was excluded from the land, and the removal of indigenous people from the land so they couldn't put fire on the land as they did for many centuries. I think we have that buildup of fuel and fire, and I think that's where a lot of the catastrophic fire risk comes from in the US. So every forest is different, but there are definitely some forests that are used to that regular cycle of fire. So I would love to hear, yeah, in terms of Global Forest Watch, I'm not sure how they incorporate that, but I know that it's very critical.
And I would add to that for the cultural beneficial uses of our people, coming back to first foods, food is sovereignty. And when we're able to navigate freely and gather our foods and hunt our foods, our women put fire on the ground. Our women collected 65% of our food. Our men hunted for animals. So fire was used for all of those cultural beneficial uses and subsistence traditional uses as we lived upon this land, not separate from the land, and being able to enact policy. In California, we have Senate Bill 310, which recognizes cultural fire practitioners. So this is now coming full circle, the knowledge that we have today, and all of us being able to grasp what we need to do, I think is really, really important to maintain our cultural beneficial uses of the land, the earth, the water, the air, the fire, and to continue on to help impact policy that will enable us to do more of the work that needs to be done.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing that. I think as far as Global Forest Watch and accounting for the beneficial uses of fire, for that part of the question, I think it is because Global Forest Watch relies very heavily on satellite data, it can often be really difficult to understand what exactly is causing a fire on the ground. So I think the way that we try to account for this in the GFW data is around the way that we communicate. And so we do try and highlight the fact that suppressing fires for decades has led to a fuel buildup of fuel that increases the risk of extreme fires, and try to highlight kind of the cultural benefits of burning as well for sustaining livelihoods. Um, and so I think, yeah, I think it's important to highlight that there are nuances with the data and that you need to be careful in interpreting, I guess, the the data that's on Global Forest Watch. I think one other thing that maybe I would just note is that the tree cover loss due to fires data doesn't pick up low intensity burns as much. And so a lot of kind of the controlled burning, like prescribed fires, um, those tend to have kind of a lower intensity. And so those are less likely to be picked up by the tree cover loss due to fire data. There is probably, well, there are like natural fires that occur across the boreal regions, and those get captured in the tree cover loss due to fires data as well. And a lot of those are kind of natural and part of natural cycles, but what's not natural is kind of the frequency and intensity that we've been seeing. And so you can kind of see that in the data that the fires have been covering larger areas, burning more intensely. And so we try to like distinguish between kind of good fire, natural fire that's occurred in regular cycles, and bad fire that is more intense and more frequent that has negative impacts. So hopefully that helped answer the question.
Great. Thank you so much, Belinda, Natasha, Jimmy, Juan, and Ricardo for answering all of the many questions we had. I just quickly dropped in the chat a link to the map and dashboard Global Forest Watch, as well as this link will be how you can access the tree cover loss due to fire data that Jimmy mentioned. And just wanted to thank our speakers again for their time and sharing their great insights around this topic. I also invite you all to explore our help center, which I put in the chat. That's where you can find the latest resources, such as past webinar recordings, as well as step-by-step guides and materials on how to use our data. And I also dropped our email in the chat in case you'd like to get in touch with collaboration or any questions we didn't answer today. So thank you again. And with that, we'll end our webinar. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day, night, or evening. All right, everyone. Bye-bye. Take care.